Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
Good afternoon, Team Krulak community. On behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, welcome back to the Brewcast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. I'm your host, Major Ian Brown, Operations Officer at the Krulak Center. Today, we are taking a look at, or some background initially, part of the broader Force Design 2030 reforms that have been underway since 2019 under General David Berger's Commandant's planning guidance. Talent Management 2030 has become a focus area in those efforts. And just last week, the Marine Corps wrapped up its inaugural Talent Management Summit to provide deeper discussion and feedback on Talent Management 2030. So joining us for this special Brewcast episode are members of the Talent Management Strategy Group at Headquarters Marine Corps. They're going to discuss the outputs of the summit, the status of Talent Management 2030, and the way forward on this for the Marine Corps. So first, I'm just going to do a short introduction here for the names of our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it to them to give a little bit more about their backgrounds, what brought them to the team, and then introduce what they do, and we'll get into questions right away. So with us today, we have LtCol Reid Houck, who is the deputy of the Talent Management Strategy Group, Master Gunnery Sergeant Sage Gouda, who's the senior enlisted member, Captain Julie Schumacher, who is the manpower analyst, Captain Adam Devine, FMF liaison officer, Gunnery Sergeant Nicholas Knoll, who is enlisted integration. And then I also want to give a shout out to the person who helped us organize this, which is Maj Sharon Sisbarro. She just graduated Command and Staff College. She was a Women, Peace, and Security scholar with us here under the Krulak Center, and she went right over to do ComStrat for the Talent Management Strategy Group. So appreciate her efforts in putting this together. All right, with that, sir and ladies and gentlemen, we'll turn it over to you to just kind of introduce yourselves a little bit further, a little bit of background, and then dive into what the Talent Management Strategy Group is doing to support Talent Management 2030.
Hey, great. Thank you very much for having us here. I really appreciate it. My name is LtCol Houck, doing Talent Management 2030 on behalf of the ACMAC with the Talent Management Strategy Group and a team of exceptionally talented Marines. The key that we have to focus on in this space is that we're really moving out on a 21st century model for talent management. If we were to look at this through the lens of Brute Krulak in the 21st century, I'd say we're in an interwar period. And frankly, as we were drafting through TM 2030 with the Commandant, my framework continued to go back to that interwar period of the 30s and how we had to innovate in this space. So in this interwar period right now, we have to innovate to the 21st century in talent management. We will need a talented, intelligent, innovative, and lethal Marine Corps. And force design is the design process to get there. But what I argue is, at this time and space, talent management, frankly, is our Higgins boat. If we don't modernize in talent management, we're going to be very challenged to meet and adapt to the talent war we face in modern society. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Master Guns Sage Gouda to continue.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, Master Gun Sage Gouda. Just a quick background on me. I started out sometime in the infantry, transitioned to recon, and in 2008, I joined MARSOC. And then for the last 3 years before joining this team, I was the MARSOC monitor and had a great time and great experience there. So as soon as I heard about talent management and TMX, I was extremely eager and passionate to join this team. I'm glad I am. I'm surrounded by other Marines who share the same passion, and we're looking forward to moving forward. Sir?
And my name is Captain Adam Devine. I'm a logistics officer by trade. Spent some time in 1st Marine Division as a lieutenant, and then as a captain in 2nd MLG with 2nd Transportation Battalion and CLR2. When I was notified I was coming to the team, I was ecstatic being able to be a part of a small team of high performers looking at innovative solutions for the problem at hand, and being on the team that's helping deliver the force for Force Design 2030 is very exciting. So glad to be here and contributing, and we're going to get it done.
Gunnery Sergeant Nicholas Knoll. I'm a career planner by trade. Prior to joining the Talent Management Strategy Group, I worked down in Manpower Management Enlisted Assignments Retention Section. I believe I was recruited pretty heavily by Master Gunnery Sergeant Gouda to come up to give another perspective from the enlisted retention perspective and some initiatives we can do in the Marine Corps So everything we started down with M&RA, using TMX to kind of help leverage some of those efforts to continue the efforts to evolve the talent management sphere. So I'm excited to be here, excited to contribute, and I look forward to everything.
Good afternoon, Capt Julie Schumacher. I'm a aviation supply officer by trade. Spent some time on the West Coast before heading up to Naval Postgraduate School. Received the 8840 MOS and currently conducting my utilization tour. Previously worked within DCM&RA at the NPP Manpower Plans Policy and Budget Branch before getting plucked up to work for Lieutenant Colonel Houck and the Assistant Commandant for Talent Management.
I'm Maj Sharon Sisbarro. I'm the Comstrat officer here, and I just got on deck last week. So I know one of the complaints that we've heard from Marines, don't worry, Marines, we've heard you. You want to hear more about TMX and you want to hear more about talent management. I just got on deck last week. I can assure you that we're going to start moving and shaking a lot more. You'll hear a lot more about talent management.
All right, great. Well, I think, to help support that, this is, a good jumping off platform. I think the timing is really good because last week, if my calendar is correct, is when the Talent Management Summit was being held. So there's a lot of fresh information that could probably be shared. So if you could, collectively tell us what was the summit's, what were its focal points of discussion? What were some of the goals that it was trying to achieve in terms of outputs? And then what are some of the initiatives that Marines can expect to come out of it?
So I will say there's some broad themes that came out of the Talent Management Summit that we have to take seriously as we move forward. So about 100 participants from across the Fleet Marine Force, MAR 4 Res, and our partners across Headquarters Marine Corps. And those themes really, expanded beyond just what's written in Talent Management 2030, and that is bottom-up feedback loops. We have to have it, and the three things we need to really be focused on are transparency. So transparency is critical to talent management, and the fleet really resounded in those statements to us last week. The next is freedom and agency. Those are critical. Meeting Marines where they're at and recognizing that we do want a more mature Marine Corps and the things we have to do to expand that realm in the talent management space so that we achieve that down the road. And then an anchor and bedrock, right? We recruit Marines to the yellow footprints. We retain families. And that was, said multiple times throughout the week, is we have to do more to recognize that the talented Marine we want likely has a wife or a husband and, potentially has children. And those things have a vote in the space when we talk about retention or not. And even that, expand beyond that, right? These Marines might have exceptional family members, et cetera. Those things balance out. And we have to be able to step forward with a talent mindset that achieves that basis of family and service at the same time.
Okay, so that's a lot of feedback going in there. So what are some things that the summit maybe took that, packaged it up, and how is it going to move out on some of those items?
Right. So I think if you look at how we're designed, we're a small team, and we do most of our actions by, with, and through stakeholders, both the Headquarters and Marine Corps, but I would offer in some cases, more importantly, the fleet. So it gave them a platform to give some of the recommendations. So I think it served two main purposes. It validated a lot of the initiatives that we're working on currently. And then, which for a listed perspective, what I'd like to highlight there is updating the retention order. So the current retention order is dated 2010. So we're modernizing it and looking at various things to bake into it to update that to serve as a source document that's updated for retention efforts. Another initiative that we're looking at is shifting the enlisted retention board or promotion boards to better align the ecosystem. And some of this is still conceptual. We're working with action officers. But if you look at how the current officer promotion, retention, and assignments process goes, it's a little bit more sequential. So we're looking at from an enlisted perspective, sequencing things in a more natural order. And non-select notification for enlisted. So similar to P4 for officers, look into before the MAR admin comes out to let who's identified for selection, notifying the service members who did not get selected. And those are just some of the items. The list goes on. It's probably 100 items, and then we took more from the summer from last week. And we're still sifting through all that. You got to remember, it let out Friday. We still got feedback. We only got some of the stuff from last night. So we're still sitting there going through, and we're going to be briefing the ACMAC on tomorrow, actually.
So one of the resounding topics that came from the fleet as well was career flexibility. It's talked about in TM 2030, and it seemed to be really important to the fleet as well to speak on one of the items that the team is working on for the buy with and through our stakeholders for the fleet is separate competitive categories. And really what that is doing is it's further dividing our unrestricted officer promotion category into groups of like MOSs, of jobs that recognizable by the board and able to really distinguish the best and most qualified individual within that category. And it's going to provide just more equity across MOSs and really fitting the Marine to the requirement and what the Marine Corps is in need of.
Okay, great.
One thing I'd like to add real quick for the listeners. So the summit was divided into three working groups. One working group focused on retention, one working group focused on career flexibility, and the last working group focused on IT modernization. And I will say one other common theme that came out, even though there was a working group dedicated just to IT modernization, every other working group had sub-breakout groups that all brought up how IT modernization needs to be one of the number one things we tackle.
You know, the Commandant's been talking about that. This is very important, right? You can buy a house on your cell phone, but you can't select where you want to go on your cell phone. I mean, not to be flippant with the principles of why you need IT modernization, but in reality, we need to be able to meet Marines as a Marine Corps and talent managers in the service of the Marine Corps. We need to be able to meet Marines where they're at. And this generation of Marines, meeting them where they're at is meeting them at where the information space they're comfortable in, and then also creating a transparent agency in that information space where they feel like their input is received and understood by an antiquated system that we've had in the past, right? Excel spreadsheets, et cetera, emails to your monitor, a more real-time interaction to create a transparent environment is critically important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, sir. And I'll get your comment here shortly. But could you maybe expand on some IT modernization things that might be coming out in the near term?
Yeah, so with IT modernization, it's a challenge, right? This is a space that's extremely challenging. What I will say is the Department of Navy has paired with us under contracting vessels that already exist to get at that requirement. The Commandant and the POM cycle has funded $140 million towards IT modernization, specifically in the manpower system. What you would say, though, is that we have to look at this from a service perspective. So DCI, TECOM, MNRA, CDNI, and others, right? We have to have a service perspective about modernization of IT systems. So if we could get to a visionary state, and I don't think we're very far off from it. I can't give you a time scale yet. I don't think we're very far off from it, where a Marine, via the access of an iPad or his cell phone, is able to look at the lifestyle or the life chain of his career and project where he's going to create opportunities for career flexibility at the touch of his finger, right? Because if we're talking about meeting Marines where they're at, does every corporal in every battalion or squadron have access to a computer to interface with his career in a digital environment? No. We have to be able to meet him where he's at in a system that allows them to communicate. So I will tell you the longer answer to a long answer is we're working on it. We're about 100, we have 100 days with a cross-functional team with DON to get to an end result, to look at contracting out an option and a resource. So if you look at it, what we call talent management engagement portal, that might be the way forward. That all Marines have a portal that they can look at the avatar of their career life. And it captures the things they say to their recruiter the first time that Marine meets the recruiter, from his benefit tag, in that intimate setting as a civilian, all the way through his career progression is tracked. We don't have bins of information that we lose over time. So that maybe we could look at that Marine via this portal and say, hey, your benefit tag was world travel, see the world was your benefit tag when you met the recruiter at the first time. What is your benefit tag today? If you're hitting them a year out from retention, what's your benefit tag today? Maybe it's shifted. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe that Marine's a maintainer in a C-130 squadron. His benefit tag was see the world, but he hasn't gotten to go anywhere. Well, maybe we can fix that. Those are the ways I think if we get to a modern IT system, we can know more about the Marine can know more about their career. And if you can marry those things up, you'll achieve career flexibility, a better retention ecosystem, et cetera. And I really believe it's right on the horizon.
Okay, actually, so I got a question in the chat that kind of touches that, so I'll bring it up here shortly, but do you have a comment to add?
Yeah, just wanted to caveat off the career flexibility and kind of the themes that we saw during the Talent Management Summit. And one of the big things that we're realizing and feedback we're getting is we need to do a better job and create better processes of finding the talent within the organization that already exists in the reserve component and being able to leverage that in the active component. And on top of that, being better as a force at creating processes and creating a talent management environment that considers the total force. And that's all aspects of the Marine Corps. So we referenced the fleet, we referenced MAR4 Res, but what we realized from the summit is that as a service, we need to look at ourselves as a total force and be able to identify and utilize the talent within in a little bit better manner. But that was all I wanted to caveat off that.
Okay, actually, and there's a second question in here kind of touches on services, so I'm going to come back to that in a second. But so back to that career tag thing you talked about, sir. First question here, it kind of goes into the retention category, which is one of those three focus groups. And so in that retention group during the Talent Management Summit, were there any things that were noted that leaders could, like things that Marines said that if you gave it to them or if their leaders told it to them, that would help retain them in the Marine Corps if they were looking at getting out? Like what keeps them in?
Gunny, do you want to go with this one?
Yeah, so I can speak for myself with my interactions with Marines from being a unit level career planner. It varies a little from unit to unit. But the big thing that we got out of the summit is anything that we can do to incentivize performance. So whether that's a monetary incentive, whether it's another type of incentive, be it time off or housing opportunities or whatever it is, a lot of what we got to and what we got out of the recruiting and retention working group was it boils down to quality of life. So things that you can do to improve quality of life, whether it's a little bit of extra money in the pocket, better living quarters, opportunities to live out in town, things of that nature. Those were a lot of things that were recurring that got brought up over and over again. But again, that'll vary. If you ask 10 Marines, you may get 10 different answers for what they would actually want to see. But those were kind of the big ones as far as monetary incentives and then quality of life things related to housing.
Was your question more what the commands could currently do?
I guess it could cover both of those, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if there were things identified in that retention group that have worked to keep Marines in, was that brought up as something that should be, shared more widely, or were there things that are not being, said or offered right now that would improve retaining?
One thing that I know is a common thing, and please chime in on this, is command climate, and that doesn't cost anything. So, and TMX is not going to be able to go to the barracks and go to the commands to influence that. So that's where we talk about that fleet buy-in, buy with and through. Command climate from the surveys we've seen is the number one reason Marines are getting out. Now, when you peel back the onion, it's hard to tell. It varies from geographical location to command itself, what those hot buttons are. But command climate is something that any leader, enlisted or officer can get after right now.
And Master Guns, you have a great point, right? So if we put this into the big blue arrow of retention, really retaining the talented force, if you put it into context of over time, we spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to recruit the Marine and put him through his initial pipeline. But there's not near as much investment at the 36-month mark at the expiration of his first term contract, or even into the further out STAP contracts. So I think the challenge could be pivoted, right? what are we doing as a service to create an environment where we feel we have to continue to recruit the Marine? Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to get a puppy if they reenlist, right? Not to be flippant, but I'm not promising that. But what I am challenging the Marine Corps to think about is what role does the major XO and OPSO or company commanders or staff section heads, department heads in a squadron, officers and staff NCOs play in the retention ecosystem? Is it just a paperwork process that you go through and you see the dentist and you see the doctor and you route your paperwork and it silently goes through the process in an analog system? Or are we looking at a system whereby there's more agency across the enterprise to be invested in the retention effort? So if I would say, could you look at an XO of a unit and challenge that XO to be the chief recruiting officer for the retention? And it literally results in kneecaps and kneecaps. I wonder, right? The silence that we haven't researched in this space. But what would a Marine do? Napoleon said, what would a Marine do, or what would a soldier do for a strip of ribbon? What are we doing for just a good conversation, right? And will that conversation make a difference? I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant. Bonuses matter. Quality of life matters. Barracks, stability for family, transparency, agency. All those things are critical. But there's one element that doesn't cost a whole lot, and that's creating an environment, maybe through PME and other institutions, that we create an officer corps and a staff NCO corps that is bought hook, line, sinker, and retention of talent. Because I'm telling you, we're in an interwar period and we're in a global war for talent. And if we don't figure it out, we're going to be without our Higgins Bill.
And if I could add something, one thing, when Captain Schumacher joined the team, and we're coming up with all these different ideas and concepts, some of the variables that we take into consideration, does it make it more efficient for the Marine, for the command and headquarters of Marine Corps, in that order? So I want to make sure that the listeners know we're not trying to add more packs or more rocks to their pack, but that's kind of the lens that we look through. And some of these initiatives sound like the command team is just going to have more to do. So a part of this ecosystem that we're modernizing is a better toolkit, both in person and virtual, to give some commands who need it more some resources. Here's a command retention mission. Here's resources that would complement that.
Okay, and so actually on that, and then so you're thinking about PME as well. A couple questions popped out talking about maybe some other things that are being discussed to empower those commands to have more tools to draw on. So some thoughts were, is there discussion of more commanders' discretion for financial bonuses to like high performers in the command?
There is.
And as well, what about blending PME to put officer enlisted together and to sort of build that tighter relationship, that kneecap to kneecap in the schoolhouse environment, not just in the...
Yeah, so just this weekend, there was some conversations that have been had about PME and integrating PME officer enlisted side. And look, the space that we're working in is, it's theoretical in some regards, right? And we have to exist in an unconstrained environment. Recognizing that there's law and policy and all sort of other things that challenge us today does not mean that we don't challenge ourselves as a small team to look at what is the realm of possible and get approval from the ACMAC and the Commandant to possibly change law so that we can create an environment where officers, staff NCOs, PME together, so that you have, could you imagine a world where a gunny goes to NPS and gets a master's and then checks into TMX as a subject matter expert to get after the Marine Corps' issues? I can imagine that world. The reason is that gunny's checking into TMX this week. The first gunny to graduate with a master's from NPS and manpower analytics, right, Jules? That's it. Yeah. So that matters, right? That's the space that we're talking about, and I think we have to look at that. Would that, CNA did a very good study about what would retain Marines, and the number one statistically significant element that will retain Marines is career opportunity. Is PME education a master's? Is that career opportunity? That's the question we have to answer now. Or do we need to change some things to get there?
That's what that's great. I didn't know that the first one was going out of MBS, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, he's checking in next week. Gunny Smart, Brandon Smart.
Gunny Sparrow, it's a good name.
Yeah, right.
So Kevin Devine, back to your point, you talked about like looking inward at the service. So one of the questions that came in here was, first off, yeah, looking for talent within, right? Like recruiting from within. But then also, either in the Talent Management Summit or sort of your broader project, Talent Management 2030, has there been an active look at what other services have been doing in terms of changing how they manage careers, how they manage people, pilot programs that might be adopted? And I think somebody even threw in here, what about outside the U.S., allied militaries, and any examination of how they manage their populations?
So I can tell you, I can't speak on behalf of other nations' militaries or even other services within our own. What I can tell you is that we had 4 liaison officers from 4 separate foreign armed services at the summit. We have been working with all the services to gain best practices. It's talent management is it's a challenge that we're all faced with right now. We're all trying to figure it out. No one of us has the right answer. So working together, I think we found we can all come up with some pretty good ideas and get after it.
So I will say there's another. We're also working with civilian companies that mimic our scale to see some best practices that they're doing, and that's paid out a lot of dividends on seeing some best practices and the sets of reps that they have, and seeing how we can take that and transform it into the Marine Corps. But Gunny Knoll last week participated in a retention symposium at the Pentagon with all the branches of the service. If you want to just give a quick.
Yeah, so it was all the branches to include Space Force. They had a representative there, and the underlying theme is we're all facing the same challenges right now. So we have a struggle right now to clearly identify and then subsequently retain our top talent because of competition in the civilian marketplace, competition with sister services or whatever the case is. We're also having a little bit of struggle identifying that top talent in the civilians to bring into the military service as well. So it is not necessarily a Marine Corps problem that we're struggling with talent management or trying to solve talent management. It's across all the services. So if every service has some unique way or thing that they found that is working for them, we are definitely open to pursuing some of that to see if we can implement that in how we're doing talent management as well.
Great. So I got another question here in the chat. We've been taking a lot. So after this one, I'm going to open it up to the room here, see if folks have some questions as well. But this is from, actually, I'm going to call him out because we know Major Tyler Quinn, who's been a long time friend of the Career Life Center, just graduated from SAW. So he's off, going to be doing great planning stuff as well. But his question actually jumps off from this is going to be kind of geeky, but a Twitter thread that sort of blew up at 11 o'clock last night, but as it sometimes does. But looking at revisiting something as fundamental as the MOS. Yeah, little T, training command, that's what it's at. So his question is, in terms of the MOS structure as part of the manpower structure that's been around for a long, long time, has there been any view of looking at these as more flexible, more malleable, more flexibility to lat move from one MOS to another, or potentially starting off much broader in terms of when you come in and then honing down into specialization later on, like to allow a sampling period, or you do some common OJT and then sort of see where your strengths lie. And he's noting his existence, the book Range by David Epstein, talking about how generalists are often a lot more successful than very narrow hyper specialists.
Yeah. So Major Q, thank you. But I really want to pass this to Capt Schumacher, because 2 weeks ago she was in the Commandant's office pitching a lot of these very concepts that are asked, right? And the ACMAC likes it. So we're going in that space, but really I got Capt Schumacher, she's a subject matter expert.
And sir, I'd love to get the list that he rattled off, because there's things I'd probably love to add to our list of things to tackle. But one of the ones I would like to draw his attention to is the technical career path. The institution sends officers, and hopefully in the future enlisted as well, to places such as Naval Postgraduate School to get a technical MOS, to include RAO-FAO. And we utilize those Marines for 3 years, sometimes 2, and then they are pulled back to their primary MOS. There are some of them that want to be pulled back to their primary MOS, but there are others that would prefer to stay within that technical MOS. And really what the technical career path is hoping to do is allow those Marines the opportunity to remain that technical MOS. And then it's our job as the institution to create a path for them to fill to the remainder of their career, but just opening the door for really the Marine Corps to further utilize the skills that they have been educated on and have continued to refine. The one that really has been driven home for PPNO and PLUs is the Rayofeo community. Keeping those Marines in their skill, in their language, in that culture, and allowing for the foreign units to benefit from that. So as far as the flexibility within MOS, the primary MOSs, that again, I would love to get that list and speak to him to further develop that. But the flexibility right now, the conversation is with those technical MOSs, the 88XXs, the 0505s, and continuing to utilize those Marines with the skills that they have worked very hard to gain and maintain. I hope that answered his question.
Yeah, and actually, I'd really like him to come over to the Mars Center for a cup of coffee because he's been ghosting me. So that would be great to have him over in our space because I'd like to pick his brain.
Great. He's been called out by a couple folks, so he better deliver, and we know how to get a hold of him. He's
Yes,
doing
we
all
do.
this stuff for us too at the Recruitment Center.
And I think on the other end of that spectrum of generalization, we've had not to call out CD&I, but they hosted a problem framing OPT with the logistics community in May. And one of the topics they were discussing was kind of their structure, looking inward at their own community and some talent management initiatives that they can kind of take on themselves through the OC fields and CD&I and kind of shape the future for their community. And one of the things that they centered on was creating specialization and generalization tracks within their own community to kind of provide more flexibility up to the chief level of the staff and COs in their community. So conversations are happening about Headquarters Marine Corps. They are including OC fields and looking at community specific issues. But that is just a precursor to what may happen. So again, and kind of to speak more, Lieutenant Colonel Houck can probably speak more to this, but when we're looking at talent management issues from a culture versus ethos or culture and ethos perspective, there are things that we do as Marines that are more habits and norms that we've fallen into a custom of doing that are up for debate. One of those being how we kind of structure our manpower and ourselves. So yeah, just a plug for the logistics community, but yeah, we're talking about it.
Yeah, we get a lot of plugs from logistics folks for their community and what they're doing, so feel free to keep plugging. Okay, I'd like for anyone here in the room with us, if you have any questions you'd like to share, feel free, ma'am, gentlemen.
All right, so I actually have two questions, and I'll give them to you both at the same time, and then you can pick which order you want to answer them. So what I've heard of conferences and working groups and trips and whatnot. Like, what are no kidding action items that you have on the calendar? You know, in the next whatever days we're going to release this, or we're going to have this before the ACMAC, and what are things you're moving out on, or that are, you know, potential items that you're going to move out on that can get people excited to look forward to, you know, hitting the news and then see some actual change. That's number one. And then number two, I'm interested in the command climate point in terms of retention. Was there any granularity on, you know, what specifically about command climate, and does it vary by demographic? And, you know, could you tell from the whatever information you're studying? And I'm even struck by, you know, I'm the mother of 20-year-olds, and if I say the word manpower to them, they look at me like, well, I'm not a man. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. Are we conscious of our language when we're talking about talent management? A Marine is not just a he, you know, he or she. So are these things that the group is sort of wrestling with from a service perspective?
Ma'am, thank you very much. So I'll tackle it. There's some folks that can speak greater to this than me, and just around this table, specifically some of your points. But what things are we doing, right? What's hot on the docket that we're getting after? What I'd like to open with is, the Commandant says that we have an antiquated system that's 70 years old, right? He says specifically in TM 2030 that's the process that we live in. What I will say is General Adignon has led a very strong charge in the talent management space called manpower modernization over the last 24 months. So to say that the Marine Corps wasn't innovating in this space, that would be disingenuous. It certainly was. What was really interesting and showing up at MNRA as the first 0505 to be there, and then the first 30 minutes I'm there, I'm looking at the first draft of TM 2030, and then I have to dissect what is MNRA doing, current state, what is TM 2030 envisioning, and marrying those up. Believe it or not, because MNRA did not write TM 2030, the Commandant did. But believe it or not, what MNRA was doing over the last 24 months really is a supporting prelude to what 2030 envisions into a design process in the future, right? What is over 3 ridge lines from now? That's the space we're in. Now, to say the whole team here, extremely talented, decisive individuals, all with a unbelievable penchant for action, right? We just want to do a lot, right? All of us want to do things right now. We've done things, but like our partners inside of MNRA, we haven't really talked about it. And so with Sharon on the team, I envision we're going to start talking more about what we're doing. But we formed, stormed, and normed on February 6th. On February 10th, we're sitting down with the ACMAC with a Recruit the Marine campaign, right? Really revamping retention with a behavioral economics mindset, right? ACMAC liked some of our stuff, didn't like some of our stuff. The bottom line is the things he did like are already ingested in the system, and they're working it inside MNRA. Small team, not small team, very large team, network team, but we couldn't do all that, right? We have to work with partners that own those key stakes elements of modernization to get after it. So that we've done things. We're learning. We need a good Sharon Sisbarro to learn how to talk about it. Command climate. Right now, what I would tell you is there are plenty of great studies, the EMLS and others, that will give you more of a deep dive of command climate. I can't give you a 100% answer on that. I think I owe a due out back to you on what we're looking at, and probably really our listeners at CRULAC. We need to dissect that a little bit more. And then talent management in a manpower system, right? Is it time to start looking at total force human resources as a title and a way forward, right? Total force human resources. It is active, it is reserve, it is permeable. The Australians are doing some really great things with service categories, et cetera. And they don't refer to it as manpower, it's future ready workforce. Do we need to kind of get in that mindset? And I'm glad you called it out. I've sat here today speaking, and I have said him probably more than I've said her, and to the point where I've actually wrote it down that I got to stop doing that, because it is a mindset, right? It's a mindset. We have to move forward with the mindset that every Marine has unbelievable potential to be talented, and regardless of all those things that that make us diverse force, our diverse force is what makes us unique. Our uniqueness is what makes us talented. Our talents is what makes us lethal.
If I could say one of the things that, ma'am, that we are going to do, so starting in July, we'll start listening sessions with specific demographics all throughout the Marine Corps. So Marines, we hear you, and we want to hear more from you, because we're going in with an idea, or we're going in with the premise that there is no Marine Corps without Marines, period. We need to retain our Marines. Our Marines are the most important part of the Marine Corps. So why are they leaving? And this isn't just, there will be groups broken out by different demographics, such as corporals and sergeants and staff sergeants, and there'll be individual groups. But what we'd also like to hear is from the dual military couples. We want to hear from the dual professional couples, or the single Marines, single parent Marines, exceptional family member Marines, and even potentially collaborate with the DE and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Office, so that we can start talking if there are any specific reasons why Marines might leave based on gender, sex, race, ethnicity, anything like that. No topic is off the table, and this is about warfighting. This is about retaining the best talent and being able to outpace our pacing threat. And we need every single one of our Marines to be a part of that.
And another challenge about collecting the data to have a little bit more granularity on your command climate is if you look at the process by which we collect information on these various interviews, exit survey, 24-month survey, we're at the mercy of the individual holding the conversation. So part of what we're doing with this retention order is standardizing portions of these interviews with a feedback loop that is agile and goes to the right people, both the headquarters and report and leadership, so we understand the concerns and grievances. And the other part of it, why Marines are staying as well, because we don't collect that. So as a prior monitor, trying to understand, I'm going to hit the career planners up at the unit, and why are these Marines getting out? And it might be 1 or 2 words at best. There's no substance, no meat on the bone. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get after when I alluded to updating the order.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Any other questions from the room?
Yeah,
Sure.
I do. Thank you. And if this is beyond the scope, I apologize, and please feel free to. But what are you talking about and looking at in return in regards to recruiting, the impact this will have on who we're appealing to come into the recruit? Do you see this having any impact at all? Are we still going to focus recruiting on the same type that we do and then just try to develop them differently? Or do we think that there is a loop here that's going to change the way we target and recruit? And, for example, one of the things, as I recall, in TN 2030 is the idea that we do some direct recruiting. Is that on the table yet, or is that still just?
It is. What I'll tell you is we have the best recruiting enterprise, arguably, in the world, right? We know our demographic, we know what we attract, and we turn that into exceptional warfighters, and we stage the Marine Corps to be violent and lethal. Now, the reality is it obviously is a system where you find an individual, I have a seat to put him in. Maybe it aligns with what he wants to do, maybe it doesn't. We have to modernize that, and there's a couple things in the action right now. They're actually in RDT&E right now, and it's Marine Corps occupational skills matching, and it's retention predictive network. So MCOSM, great name, is a program where you can using kind of technology, study, analytics, test that potential recruit and match him up with where his natural talent attributes, desires, passions lie with jobs in the Marine Corps in that initial sessions pipeline. Or her. Thank you for calling me out. Yes, that individual and where he best aligns. Now, RPN is going to forecast, hopefully statistically significant, forecast their likelihood to retain all the way through contract, so they're unlikely to leave early. It's called non-EAS attrition, and then potentially continue to serve beyond the first term. So you can have a better picture of the individual and have that communication with the individual about where they're lining up in the Marine Corps and where they belong. We're going to mimic those things on the officer side as well, so that the individual officer will have some feedback, and we're putting them in the jobs that their talent attributes, their attitudes, etc., line up better with jobs in the Marine Corps. And all of this would say that if you do it right, if a Marine is somewhere where they're happy, they're passionate, and they're talented for, the chances that they stay and continue to contribute increase. Or when they get to the point where they're going to step away at their first tour or later in their career, that they might go direct affiliation to the reserves. So we can continue to retain that talent for the future on out.
And that actually might answer my next question, which is how are you factoring in the fact that the Marine Corps pyramid have to off-ramp people? We have a huge shift where we create a climate where 90% of Marines want to be retained, but we can only keep 40% of them. We're creating a longer term, potentially, at least theoretically, disillusionment factor. So So maybe the total force concept is useful. But anyway, so are you thinking through that as well?
Well, I think any business or company or organization would love to have that problem.
Sure.
So,
We do have to recognize that, you know, right now, we retain approximately 25% of every cohort, right? So every year, our retention mission for the FTAP population is approximately 25%. What that means is that we have to bring in approximately 36,000 fresh recruits annually. And then those 36,000 will go through their 4-year career. About somewhere between, you know, 15 and 25% of them will try it out for one reason, injury, other issues. But bottom line is that 35,000 population is going to hit the shoreline as a big wave every summer, right? And we're going to keep about 25% of them to bring them into the next side. If you look at retention as a total force, then retention exists not just in the 25%, or maybe more, maybe, you know, it changes. It might change as force design fully develops for TO structure. The 25% goes active duty. That remainder, 75% of the force, of that, 72% of it either never serve again or go in the Army Guard, right? We lose a lot. We're only retaining of the 30, you know, of the 30,000 or so that we're letting go, or actually a little less than 30, so 25,000 that we're letting go at the end of their contract. Only 3% actually stay in the reserves via direct affiliation program. So we have to maximize that retention to make the reserves healthy, keep the talent in service, and in both the reserves and the active component, phasing further down a reserve active component permeability that allows the Marine to flow more fluidly in and out, which leads to, you know, more of a direct recruiting model or lateral entry, et cetera. What if we were to take lateral entry and look at that as a reserve active component permeability function? I have a sergeant in Silicon Valley that is an executive or an IT genius at Google, but he's a sergeant. But he's really good at defensive cyber ops. Why couldn't we approach the sergeant in the reserves and say, you're really smart. You're the #1 cyber genius in the country. Why wouldn't we bring you in to work at Mar4 Cyber on a tech team? But we'll incentivize because you make $200,000 a year at Google. We can incentivize by, let's put you through the officer accession pipeline and make you a captain and give you constructive credit for your education, your knowledge, your skills. No different than we do with lawyers, by the way. And let them come in and serve at the Mar4 Cyber or other low-density, high-demand technical MOSs that we have in service. So to say that, you know, it's just direct recruitment, it might not be. It might be a more permeable ACRC environment.
That's an interesting concept. And I want to just real quick then. Do you anticipate then that there's across the total force sufficient size that we won't change the problem set, because even if you ramp up the retention desired, double or triple, there's still enough room, flexibility across the total force then to address that and then target the talent we want to keep the best and most qualified.
You know, so one of the factors that we haven't talked about just yet, at least in this forum, but it's certainly a consideration with the TMX team, is that we may still not see those trends. And the reason for that is because we have a different retirement system. So now with the blended retirement system, a Marine can get out whenever they would like. And she might decide just to get out because she's got a better opportunity on the outside. But whereas now what you might find is when you're talking to some Marines, they'll say, well, I'm too close to 20 or too close to 30. I'm not willing to give up my retirement just yet. So these are all factors that we have to constantly continue to iterate on. But it's certainly a great point that we still owe a little bit more work on that topic.
No, it's a huge problem, and I don't envy you one bit.
Yeah.
It is literally 3 ridge lines from now, but we're focusing on it, right? We're looking to call on fire on it. We need to look at what the scope and scale of ambition we have to get there.
Thank you.
May I do something?
Yeah, I just have a quick assignment for Major Sisbarro. When you talk about the reserve active permeability, this is something the reserve component has talked about for a long time, yet the word reserve does not occur in Talent Management 2030. And so one of the very first things you should put out, Sharon, should be something talking about or publicizing all of this good discussion about, how we're going to take a total force look at talent management, and that it was, it's an oversight that it's not mentioned in the original document, because now a lot of how you see you're going to leverage that talent is through working with Marines already in the reserves. So that's a good assignment.
Yes, ma'am, it's assigned, Sharon.
And I will just say that, and I'll let you move on, because I think that you have to end on a good time here for everybody concerned. But the active component doesn't read the Maj Res campaign plan. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct. Can I sign that as mandatory reading?
Our communication will absolutely include the reserve force man.
And then our next summit is in New Orleans in February.
Perfect.
Yep, so we're going there.
There's actually just a comment here in the chat noting that there's somewhat of a culture shock of active duty going over to the reserves how to characterize it. Massive culture shock and there's not an awareness or an understanding of how the different worlds operate. So it sounds like there's a
right, and then we see that permeability because one of the big big takeaways when Maj Res briefed us at the summit was really Marine Corps direct affiliation was only about 1.4% of our departing Marines. So either they're not fully aware of the situation, or they're not fully aware of the opportunities, or there's always plenty of conditions. But how can we start to better inform our Marines who still want to stick around, still want to wear the uniform and be a part of the Marine Corps? So we owe that to them.
Yeah, great. Okay, so one more time around the room, I do have some more questions in the chat, and I do want to try and get to those as well, so we can honor everybody's time here. So, okay, so we'll go back to the chat here, and I'll try and click through these relatively quickly here. So this next one is actually from Sean Reardon, who's on the advisory board for the NSC Master's Degree in Education, Training, and Development. The question is, following up on the comment about number one, retention motivator being career opportunity. In a increasingly modern and technically demanding Marine Corps, as well as operating environment as a whole, what are we doing to give recognizable academic qualifications? And the example given is you have a 20-year 0369 who spent 2 or 3 tours at an SOI. That's arguably a huge amount of formal training where demonstrating sufficient competence a little bit farther for a bachelor's degree or higher should be something that could translate into. So it is translating more of those like job opportunities into formal credentialing, something getting like that.
Well, I was just jotting that down because that was something that was really driven home at the summit last week. It's something that, again, due out of the summit is, and this question is something that we are going to take a better look at, because it is a great point. And again, I can't say it enough. That was something that came from each FMF to validate academic, a Marine getting a certain schooling and that being recognized in a capacity of either a retention bonus or something of that nature. But I'll look around the room to see if any.
I think there's a lot of initiatives. So I talked to other ARC fields, and I know there's a program currently called the COOL program that you can, MOSs can go, and it's kind of like a drop-down menu, and certain qualifications or credentials. You take a licensing exam, and that'll translate, so to kind of expedite that process. It might not scratch the itch, but I know if the ARC fields aren't involved in that process, the process won't evolve. I've talked to the staff members at the COOL program, and some MOSs take it a little bit more seriously. I think Cyber got very involved in the credentialing process for their MOS and taking everything that they did to transfer over. That's one approach. I don't know if that scratches the itch that this listener has, but like Capt Schumacher said, the other things we're taking into consideration.
Okay, great. All right, next question is, and I've actually seen this discussed in some other forums as well, so I'm personally curious too, is has there been consideration looking at multiple career tracks? The questioner is asking specifically in the officer context, but maybe there's other contexts as well, but that are weighted equally for promotion and retention. And they're asking staff track, command track, or technical specialist track. And I know there's some other allied militaries, I think, that do have these things. Is that something that's on the table?
Yeah, absolutely, Jules.
Yes. So it's a conversation that's being had for not necessarily tracks. Again, the idea of flexibility and the word track really seem to be antonyms. So we're looking at keeping that flexibility, and what is on the table right now is doing screening boards for staff billets, essentially. So you'd have your command screening board, and then what would go hand in hand with the command screening board would be your G1s of your Mark 4s, your G3s, and all the G shops of the major command. So that is what's being pitched in lieu of having 2 designated tracks. And that is at its infancy stages. Several working groups need to be conducted to really formulate that thought, but that is what's on the table for us moving forward.
Okay. So I do have a couple more questions here. We're looking at the clock. I want to make sure, again, we honor everyone's time. So I think I can kind of roll these last couple questions into a larger question to the talent management strategy team here and to the talent management office as a whole. Is obviously lots of good ideas out here. Lots of people thinking about ways to improve or change the system to improve the lethality of the warfighter, but also keep the ones that we want, keep the ones who want to stay and keep contributing. So these Marines and these other interested folks out here in our audience, if they have an idea on how to improve the system, how can they share it? Where do they submit it?
We want to hear from these Marines, and so anyone can reach us at tmx@usmc.mil, and we want to hear your ideas. You'll also have upcoming opportunities during these listening sessions. We'll be advertising them very soon, but we want to hear your ideas. These are all really great thoughts, and we can only make the Marine Corps better with input from the Marines.
Okay, great. I'll make sure you put that in the notes for this so people can start flooding your inbox. All right, sir, over to the group here. Any final comments?
No, I mean, there's, I won't say, but I'll say, it is a process, right? Talent management is a design process. But the passion the ACMAC has and the Commandant has in this space is, I would argue, a once in a lifetime opportunity to really challenge those norms that we currently face in our system, right? So know that that it's not just this team of talent management strategy group that's looking at talent management initiatives. There are partners across headquarters Marine on the fleet that are our sensors and advocates in this space that constantly loop in with us and provide feedback. The summit was a great opportunity to identify more sensors, more advocates. And it's great. Since the summit, I spent Saturday, Sunday talking more about the summit with summit attendees than I did while we're at the summit. And then on my way to work every day this week has been a conversation with somebody that was at the summit to talk about some of the things that were discussed. So that's happening across the team. This is an effort, a broad effort to get after this. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to really challenge the assumptions with the leadership we have. And it's unbelievable. So please reach out to us, tmx@usmc.mil. We want to hear from you. Can you be a sensor for us? Can you be an advocate? We would like to hear from you.
All right, great. Thank you for that, sir. And like I said, we're going to blast that email out, so stand by to get a reply. I think you'll be getting a lot of messages. Okay, so sir and everyone here from the Talent Management Strategy Group, definitely appreciate your time coming over here today to share this, share what's been going on with us, with our virtual audience, and eventually when this is posted, I think there's going to be a lot of very interested people just to peek behind the curtain and learn more about this thing that's coming. It's here and it's coming, and there's more down the road. And as you said, like once in a lifetime, like I certainly can't remember any point in the last, couple decades I've been in uniform where there's been this amount of churn and change, and seems like almost anything's possible. So it is a very exciting time. All right, to our audience, thank you very much for joining us here today as well. I'm going to hit a few upcoming events that you can all watch for coming in the next few days, and we'll start off with a new episode in our mini-series of Down the Rabbit Hole on the Russia-Ukraine war that we should be having out this weekend. This will be myself and Dr. Yuval Weber, who's our Russia SME and our regular guest, but we'll be joined by Dr. Rita Konaev, who's a research fellow at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology, and who broadcast followers might remember from a previous episode a few months ago where she was talking about urban combat considerations in Ukraine. So this coming episode, we're going to talk about that information and her perspective in the context of the current fighting ongoing for the city of Severodonetsk in the Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine, which has really been a focal point the last few weeks. And she's also going to address how there are some challenging timelines at play in the ability of Western weapon deliveries and sanctions to impact the situation on the ground in that part of the theater. And then we will have another rabbit hole coming a few days after that with our own Dr. Amin Tarzi, Director of Middle East Studies, on the different roles that Turkey has been playing for both Western and Russian efforts in Ukraine. And finally, we will have a new broadcast that will be advertised here in the coming days. It's going to happen next Tuesday at noon with Dr. Dara K. Cohen of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, which will focus on wartime sexual violence and what we know so far about sexual violence committed during the war in Ukraine. And this ties back to a couple of other episodes we've had on the subject as well. So make sure you're following us all on our social media channels so you don't miss out on any of these upcoming events. All right, again, thank you everybody for your time today, and I look forward to putting this one out.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.